What's up, CNC Woodworkers? My name's Corbin Dunn, and today I want to talk about making this butterfly bowl on my CNC machine with purple tinted epoxy and cherry wood on top. So this isn't meant to be a full tutorial. Check out some of my related videos in the description where I go into more details about how I make these types of bowls on my CNC machine. The bowl is designed in Fusion 360, and I model up the rough stock size in CAD so I can accurately position everything. The first thing I'm going to create is the bumpy 3D drip portion, as seen here. I'll start with an 8x4 piece of cherry wood, and first I rough cut it to size, go over to my planer, plane it to the correct thickness, and then final cut it to the exact width and length that I need. I'm a pretty big fan of the blue tape and super glue hold down technique. It works pretty well for me, but some things I noticed is that I actually have to really push the tape down really well to get correct adhesion. If I don't do this, I have had it separate in some occasions. The spoil board on my CNC machine has some 1/4-inch holes drilled into it, and this allows me to machine a corner piece to use for quick alignment that I can remove after I place my pieces down. I still have to be careful to remove excess tape as I don't want it to affect the alignment. I apply super glue just to the bottom of my workpiece, and then I spray some accelerator on the table and drop it down to get an instant bonding cure. So after indicating in the piece, I started machining with a 3/8 of an inch spiral upcut bit to remove a lot of the material. I then switched over to a 1/4-inch bit to get a little bit more finer detail, and finally did a finishing pass with a 1/4-inch ball-end nose mill. The ball-end nose is a little bit large, but creates nice smooth profiles that look really good for drips. Next, I made a mold to contain the epoxy in the wood. The mold is made out of 3/4-inch plywood or melamine. It's really whatever I have on stock or on hand, and it's covered with tape to ensure the epoxy doesn't stick to it. I like to use sheathing tape, which sticks really well, or cheap packing tape. It also works pretty well, but if I want to reuse the mold pieces, sheathing tape is better to use, and I frequently reuse them. I use silicone sealant to prevent the epoxy from leaking out of the mold, and I hold it together with 1.25" screws. I will frequently pre-drill holes to help with alignment and ensure that I don't get any splitting of the melamine or plywood. I generally like to seal the wood with a quick setting epoxy first to ensure I don't get any bubbles. So I seal the wood, and then I wait until it starts to cure a little bit, and then go ahead and start mixing my main epoxy and pour it on in. But the other advantage of using a quick setting epoxy is that I can kind of glue the piece in and it won't float up in the epoxy. I poured in a deep pour epoxy that's good for up to 2 inches of depth. Now, I made a mistake here. My piece is about 3 inches deep, which is just an inch over what it really should be. Now, I thought the wood would kind of compensate for this by not having as much material, or as much depth, but when I actually measure some of the height of the things, it was going up to about 2 7/8 inch of a depth, and this was just too deep of a pour. And it was about 80 Fahrenheit in my room when I did the pour, which is a little bit on the warm side for such a deep pour, so it started to go exothermic. This is not the fault of the epoxy, and I just poured it too deep. I think I could mitigate this by pouring in a room that's cooler, like about 65 degrees, which is more typical in the evenings where I am. Or I could probably put a fan on it to cool it constantly and get away with the additional depth. I initially was just going to toss the piece, so I didn't record any footage of me taking it out of the mold, but I cleaned it up in the table saw and it actually looked pretty good, so I thought I'd go ahead and machine it. My general machining strategy is to machine the outside of the bowl first while it's upside down. Alignment isn't too important, as the last operation I do is a slightly inset profile pass of the stock, and I'll show you why in just a second. Here I'm machining a different bowl. This one's walnut with white drips on the top, but the concept's the same. I start with a 3/8 of an inch bit to remove most of the waste, and then I go over to a 1/4 inch ball nose like I did before to do the finishing pass. So I want the second machining operation to be perfectly aligned with the first, and so that's why I did that slightly inside profile pass of the stock at the end. And I have to actually compensate for this in the CAD model, and so I just have a slightly offset origin for this second machining operation. The tricky part is how to indicate it in, and I solve this by gluing the bottom of the bowl to a small piece of plywood and then clamping it to a vise, and then I can just twist the vise around and indicate it in properly. So I accidentally deleted some of the footage from my camera, and I don't have the actual footage of this bowl, but it's very similar to my other bowls. So what I did first is I cut off the piece that I glued onto the bottom of the bowl using my bandsaw. I then went ahead and sanded it, and I go up to 320 or 400. Then I can finish it and either use a simple Danish oil varnish, or I will do Osmo Polyax. Hey, thanks for watching. If you have any questions, comment below and I'll try and answer them. Subscribe, it encourages me to make more videos. Bye everyone.